Good afternoon. We will start in 2 minutes, so now would be a great time to find your seat and also maybe to check your cell phone to make sure that it is silent. We'll start in 2 minutes. Welcome. Welcome to the temple. If I have not yet had the privilege of meeting you, my name is Meir Bargeron, and I am the rabbi here at Congregation Achdut V'Shalom. And we are so pleased to present this important exhibition, A Creative Life, the Architecture and Art of Alan Grinsfelder. Together, this afternoon, we will be learning about Alan Grinsfelder, his career, and his creative passions. But since we're sitting in a synagogue together, please allow me to make two, and only two, Jewish observations about Alan. Sort of sounds like a roast, I promise, that's not where it's going. First, it is a mitzvah. That is a sacred obligation joyously accepted by Jews to be engaged with our communities. Alan's multi-decade career as an architect has helped to add shape, texture, and function to the Fort Wayne that we live in today. When we look at and experience Fort Wayne, and when future generations do so, we see Alan's imprint on our community. Second, learning is also a mitzvah, and Alan has demonstrated that learning and study are gifts to be savored throughout our entire lives. He inspires us to continue to grow and to evolve. Alan's career and artistic pursuits are reflected in the words of Psalm 89, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, he builds the world with love. We are so fortunate to have Alan as a part of our community, and now it is my pleasure to introduce the man who envisioned this exhibition and brought it to fruition. John Tam is an engineer, a college professor, and a passionate art collector. And in this exhibition, John has the ability to bring together, to build something, to educate, and to bring together a beautiful, beautiful statement of creativity, of art and architecture. We are very fortunate to count him as part of our temple family, and well, since he's my husband, I am fortunate to count him as a part of my family. John will introduce the exhibition and the panel discussion that we will be enjoying today. Friends, I give you John Tam.
Well, welcome. And shalom. I think we're thrilled that there's so much energy and excitement for this exhibition and talk. And I think that reflects Alan's true gift to Fort Wayne and the community. So welcome to the opening of A Creative Life, the architecture and art of Alan Grinsfelder. The show's also available to be seen Tuesday night after a special service, and on December 7th and 8th from 1 to 4. So mark that down if you want to come back, or if you have friends who want to see the show that couldn't make it today. This exhibition has been a labor of love for the last 6-7 months. And I've been fortunate to get to know both Maureen and Alan through the process. I have seen their lovely home, and I have spent a lot of time at Firefly and also Alan's studio at his home. Both Maureen and Alan have been past presidents of this congregation and are still active in the community and civic activities in Fort Wayne. So it's a testament to their contribution to Fort Wayne, especially since they're not originally from Fort Wayne. So what inspired me for this exhibition? A combination of creative areas such as architecture and art and the pursuit of lifelong learning. I'm new to Fort Wayne, along with Mayor, and in conversations with Alan, the contribution of his and his firm's architectural talent that have added to the Fort Wayne cityscape. So we probably pass by many of the buildings on a daily basis. Architecture and art have also been personal interests, and Alan is a fine example of the merger of these two. Lifelong learning, I think he is still the oldest student at Purdue Fort Wayne. Is that true? And he decided to do the great thing of getting additional degrees after his retirement. So I think he got his master's degree in organizational leadership and then also his BFA. And this week symbolizes a historic milestone for Alan. He turned 89 years old this week. So as you can see, and hopefully you'll see later, this exhibition showcases both the architectural and art endeavors of Alan. The architecture is centered on 5 key projects that you'll see at the show, and on 3 central themes in terms of the fine arts. So in terms of acknowledgements, this definitely would not have been possible without the help and assistance of many people. The CAV Art and Beautification Committee, especially Sharon Eisbart, who helped with this project. Staff at CAV, Samara Charay, Lily Noga, Timmy Oberly, Charlie Smiley, Grinsfelder Associates Architects, Ed Welling, Cindy Welling, and Bill Carr for their financial support and permission to use verbiage and photographs for the exhibition in the architecture portion, and also for the loan of works for the architecture exhibition. Dr. Harry W. Salen Foundation for their sponsorship, Amy Keller for her wonderful help in the booklet and the posters, Beth Zweig and Fran Adler for their help and support of the booklets and posters, and of course the volunteers who help cover the support for this show: Beth Zweig, Kathy Sider, Jamie Berger, Mickey Keeps, Sharon Eisbart, Wendy Soltz, Fran Adler, Michael Thies, Harriet Miller, Monica Worley, Dan Zweig, Jackie and Eric Schreier, Marsha and Denny Reynolds, Mimi and Don Zellman, Nancy Dicker, and of course my husband, Rabbi Meir Bargeron. And I could not have done this without the support of Maureen and Alan Grinsfelder. So they kind of welcomed me to their home, and I could hear more about their stories. So I'd like to introduce the moderator of today's talk, Irene Walters. Irene has been a leader in corporate, nonprofit, educational, and civic endeavors. She's been a key driver of many community projects, including riverfront development, and during her career at former IPFW, the Mastodons on Parade Public Art Initiative. She's also been heavily involved with nonprofits, including GFW, Inc., Friends of the Rivers, and the Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne. She also, here at the temple, helped do the fundraising for the temple's 175th anniversary. And I think she was the natural choice for the moderator of this talk because she has touched all three members of this panel and worked closely with them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Irene.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Irene. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the remarkable journey of a visionary whose work has left an indelible mark on Fort Wayne. Today, we'll learn more about this exceptional man who for 55 years devoted his talents to help shaping our city through architectural projects. His designs have brought character and beauty to the spaces we call home. But as inspiring as his career was, his story didn't end there. Upon retiring, he embarked on a new path that speaks to the unending curiosity and drive that has defined his life. At the age when most people are slowing down, he enrolled at IPFW, proving it's never too late to start something new. He not only earned a bachelor's degree in art, but also began exploring painting, creating powerful works that speak to abstract and political themes, challenging and engaging viewers in profound ways. His journey reminds us that learning and growth do not have an age limit. His curiosity, courage to step into new territory, and his relentless pursuit and passion inspire us all. He teaches us that our desire to create, to question, and to evolve can be lifelong pursuits. Soon you'll have a chance to hear directly from Alan. But first, Jeff Paddock, City Councilman and former Director of Headwaters Park, will comment on the impact of Alan's architecture, and then followed by John O'Connell, Dean of the School of Visual and Performing Arts at Purdue, Fort Wayne, will share some anecdotes about Alan as a student, which will be very interesting. After Alan speaks, you'll have a chance to ask any questions of our panel. But right now, it is my pleasure to welcome Jeff Paddock to the podium.
Oh my gosh, thank you. How are the acoustics out there? I feel like I'm ready to preach here, so it's wonderful to be here. I still have my program from the First Presbyterian Church here when we adjourned just a couple of hours ago, and I did want to bring greetings from Pastor Annie Epling, who I believe is going to be a part of your service here on Tuesday the 26th. Unfortunately, we have City Council will be in session. But I do want to send greetings, and what a wonderful opportunity it is for me. John, thank you so much. I know you approached me months and months ago and said, write this down on your calendar, Sunday, November 24th. And I certainly wouldn't miss it for anything, because not only is it a pleasure to be here with all of you, but to honor my good friend, Alan Grinsfelder. And before I do that, though, I've got to say a word about Irene Walters. And I do want to say, particularly in light of the fact that I saw you and Bob at we have so many, wonderful anniversaries in this area, and it was our 200th birthday here for the celebration of Allen County last weekend at the Memorial Coliseum that, thanks to Irene, another wonderful, wonderful, successful event. But 30 years prior to that, October 22nd, 1994, and Irene, you don't look a day older than you did back then. 30 years ago on October 22nd, 1994 was Fort Wayne's 200th birthday. That was our bicentennial. And that was a big celebration where we really got started, I think, on the Headwaters Park project. And of course, Irene, you did so much to bring that forward with fundraising and attention and publicity. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. And it's hard to believe that 30 years have passed. Irene, you did mention that I am the former executive director. That's really still sinking in, because Our term just kind of passed here as we signed our final 990 tax return here with our accountant last week. And I think officially that is sent in on December the 15th. So maybe I have a few days left on the clock. But I must say that it was 32 years ago in December of 1992 when I first met Alan Grinsfelder. And some of you may know that I had run a campaign for the Indiana State Senate, and we came pretty close, but we didn't quite make that. And so I was a little down and out. One of the things I'd spoken about during my campaign was how important it was to invest in infrastructure, and particularly with flood control and flood mitigation in the city. And I know we're going to see a couple of those things later, but one of the reasons and the big reasons for Headwaters Park was flood mitigation and flood control in downtown Fort Wayne. And so Alan Grinsfelder was there. I remember going up and meeting him, and I was a candidate for the position of executive director. There were a number of folks that were in contention. I was one of the names. I was later selected, and I was very pleased to start that position in early January of 1993. But I was I must say, I was just a little inhibited. Intimidated might be too strong a word. I was a little inhibited by Alan, because here was this, really, well-educated, architect who'd done so many things, and I was, bringing this project forward. And here, I didn't know anything about architecture. I knew very little about what I was getting into, although I didn't say that in my job interview. But I did know that we needed to get this done and that we were going to be working together, and I think it turned out very well. I also want to say I think I saw my friend Julie Donnell out there in the audience somewhere, and we didn't get a chance to say hello yet, but the only other architect I really knew personally in life was John Schoaf. And not only was John a neighbor later on in life, but such a good friend, and actually hired me for the Headwaters Park position in late December, starting in early January of 1993 to begin our journey. And John certainly did so much as president of that commission to move this forward, working with you side by side as well, Alan. But I remember so well that we would meet periodically for planning. I mean, this was a big vision. This was a big plan that had come down. And Alan Grinsfelder, Ed Welling is here, and many of the young associates at the time were charged with moving this plan forward. We were charged, the Headwaters Park Commission, with John Schoaf as our president, and then I as your executive director, to raise the money from the private sector that Irene helped us do to try to move this forward. And that was a pretty big task. But the project that Alan was so brilliant in not only designing but implementing that design was a big public-private partnership, probably one of the first that we saw in Fort Wayne, with many more to follow. And because of, I think, the confidence in his design and the confidence in his work, we were able to raise the money. At the time, about $10 million. Back in the 1990s, that was pretty big money. And I am pleased that with the years that the Headwaters Park Commission and then Alliance came forward, we raised a total of $15 million before the sun sets here on us here in just a couple of weeks. I mentioned that we would meet at Alan's office. And of course, I mentioned I was a little inhibited at first, but once you got to know him, and of course his wonderful wife Maureen is here, what wonderful down-to-earth people. And of course, I learned so much about the intricacies of all of the things you've got to do as an architect. And that's, Lord knows, I could never be one, right? But it's really an outstanding job, and all of the things that, that he did. And we came forward, and because of fundraising, because of the time that it takes, I think, just to put a plan together, we did Headwaters Park in stages. And there were basically four of those, four major stages. And we started on October 22nd, 1994, with the kickoff and the burial of the time capsule that Irene was so heavily involved in. And then we moved forward with phase one and then phase two. And we thought, well, we wanted to really make this attractive, but we also wanted to make it functional. It was designed, the grassy area of the park, of course, right? It was designed to absorb water. But we wanted to make it attractive. When the water's not up and the land is dry, you want people to really look at it and enjoy it. And I think Alan and his crew was really able to do that. and also something that is functional, because the pathways, the gardens, the grasses, the trees, all of those things we wanted to make sure people would enjoy. But of course, on higher ground, just behind a flood retention wall that was so brilliantly part of the design plan that Alan put forward, was the festival center. The festival center that, would be the home. We first thought 4 or 5 events might be there. Then it was, 10, and then it was 15. I know John Schoaf said, well, someone's going to want to use this every weekend, and indeed we found that it did. And when we first started the festival center, people were bringing in their tents, and I think Alan first, and then Ed came forward and said, we should really build a pavilion. And that pavilion that followed, the Lincoln Financial Pavilion, of course, named after the largest donor of that time, the Lincoln Financial Foundation, and of course Ian Rowland's help was very outstanding, was the name on that pavilion. When that was built, and how many of you have been down there to see the Lincoln Pavilion or been to an event, right? There are festivals there now almost every weekend, and now 3 months of ice skating. So not only is this beautiful, but it is functional, and of course something that is still on our minds to continue to work on. I do want to mention a couple other things before the cane starts to come out, and we're just about there, right, John? Because we do want to yield here to the floor, but I think we did a really good job. There were extra things that we would have liked to have done. The towers that I think are on display that Alan came forward with, and Ed, and design architect Eric Kuhn, of course, was a major part of this. We don't want to slight him, but Alan, this is your show today and presentation. But Eric Kuhn's initial design and brilliance was, should not be overstated. But the towers that we were hoping to bring forward are still something we might be able to do in the future. There you see a little bit of that picture and all of that in its glory way back 25 years ago before we had big trees. And also one of the big things was the splash pad. We were at the first splash pad, I think, in Northeast Indiana, and we are actually working very, very hard to bring that back. So all of that, was my initial working with Alan and our Headwaters Park Commission, which later then became the Headwaters Park Alliance. Again, flood control, a beautiful downtown Central Park, a festival center, ice skating rink with the beautiful Lincoln Pavilion added, and many other things, all because of the brilliance of my good friend, Alan Grinsfelder. And so on that point, I hope I haven't gone too long. I will yield, and then we'll try to answer questions later on. So thank you all very much. It's such an honor for me to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone, and hi, Tony. Thank you all for asking me to participate in this wonderful event. I have to say, Irene, the billing is not quite, I never got the anecdote note, so I hope I have some anecdotes, but really I've been asked to cover the years of Alan's time at IPFW or PFW. So my presentation is sort of more chronological about some of his achievements and perhaps a couple of his challenges in his time at IPFW. I will say, to be honest, the first time I encountered Alan, I really wasn't very nice. I was at, my office is in the office of the Visual Arts Building, and I looked down the hall, and I said, who is that little old man wandering around the art center down there? And I quickly found out that he wasn't wandering. He was not wandering. He was here with a significant amount of purpose. And I also found out he wasn't little. I found out he was a significant man of stature in our community. And one of the kindest men I've ever encountered, I just have to say. So it's a pleasure to talk about Alan and his time at IPFW, PFW. I'll keep going back and forth. As I studied, I had to interview Alan, because I only know Alan since I was really dean from 2012, only to find out that Alan's been involved with IPFW since the first building went up. So if you don't like Kettler Hall, talk to Alan. He was, on the design team. So in 1964 and 1965, Allen was on the design team for Kettler Hall. He was also charged with putting together a site plan for immediate expansion of what was then Indiana University and Purdue University. They were separate institutions in one building. They were not merged as a university yet. And Allen was on the design team as a very young architect on behalf of A.M. Strauss Associates, who were building Kettler Hall. Well, the Purdue chancellor was so taken by Allen's abilities that he asked him to consider being a faculty member as an assistant professor to teach construction engineering. And Allen said, "Oh, I never thought about being a college professor. Can I do both? Will you let me be an architect and a college professor?" And at that point, the gentleman said, "Sure, you could do that. You can do both of those things." So in 1965, he did two things. He started his own firm. At the same time, he became an assistant professor at Purdue University in engineering. Well, he did both for a while. He left A.M. Strauss, started his own firm. And 6 years later, the dreaded, John Rehov's here, a couple of professors are here, Dean Friedman is here. Assistant professors hate the sixth year. He's not, Ron's nodding. It's the dreaded publish or perish, right? It's your promotion in tenure time. You don't get an option. You got to do it in your sixth year. So the chancellor at that time asked Allen in 1971 to pursue his promotion and tenure. But he said if he did, he expected Allen to devote all of his time to being a professor and no longer his own architectural firm. Well, as you can imagine, Allen said, "No, I'm an architect first, I'm a professor second." So he left his assistantship and left as a professor because his own firm was getting quite busy. So in 1971, he resigned as an assistant professor and began to dedicate all of his time to his own practice. Fast forward to 2008, after he retired, which, by the way, he doesn't like that word, even though I used it a couple times in my presentation. He doesn't like the word retired. He returned to Purdue Fort Wayne, which was also IPFW at the time, to study in our OLS program, which was mentioned earlier. That's Organizational Leadership and Supervision Program. And he decided to seek a master's degree in OLS. And I asked him, sometimes I'm going to quote what he actually said because I can't say it any better. I said, "Allen, why did you pursue a master's degree in OLS?" He said, "Well, I didn't have to write a dissertation." Good reason, Allen. Good reason. At the time, he was serving on a few not-for-profit boards, and he thought he could be a more effective member of these boards by attaining this OLS degree. And when I say a few, I mean Friends of the Library, League for the Blind and Disabled, Headwaters Park Alliance, and the History Center. And that's just to name a few of the boards he was on while getting his master's degree. When I asked Allen, what did he get out of the degree? What did you get out of this master's degree? This is so Allen. "I got to meet some nice people, and I made some new friends." That was it. Dead stop. That was the value of his master's degree. Nice people and new friends, as we can see by who are sitting out here. All right, in 2013, Maureen saw an article in a paper about a painting class for non-majors, and she suggested that Allen take this non-major class in 2013. And to quote Allen, he said, "I think Maureen was probably getting a little tired of me being at home." So he enrolled in the class with Sarah Nordling. He took the class twice with Sarah Nordling, as long as the second time he didn't have to do the same assignments he did the first time. And Sarah said, "Fine, join me." That was 2013. In 2014, he sat down with John Rehov, who's joining us today. Hello, John, who was chair of the Department of Fine Arts at the time. And he wanted to take some other classes. And John said, "Well, if you have to take other classes, you're going to have to enroll as a student." So what did he do? He enrolled as a full-time Bachelor of Arts student, and he took classes in drawing, ceramics, painting, sculpture, and printmaking. A few years into his BA, he wanted to be considered for the BFA degree. Now, the BFA degree is a much more concentrated degree. You decide what specific area you're going to study, and he was thinking about painting, and you really zone in on that. It's sort of a pre-professional degree, and he wanted to be considered for the BFA degree. Well, in order to do that, you have to have a portfolio that's reviewed by the faculty. And so Alan brought his portfolio forward, and much to his surprise, the faculty said, no, you don't have enough material in your portfolio to be reviewed. We will not accept you in the BFA program. So what did he do? He went home, he got into that studio, he started painting, and he created a whole new portfolio and went back a year later and asked the faculty to be considered. And they said, wow, okay. He was accepted into the BFA program after doing all of that work. The BFA degree requires a BFA thesis presentation. It's a year-long process that requires a theme. Alan had read a book by a German forester about the hidden life of trees. Now, Alan loves nature, he loves trees, and he loved this book. He loved this idea that there was a hidden life between trees. So as you see in the exhibit, he themed his entire senior thesis on trees and the life of trees. And there's a beautiful exhibit out there, and I think only one of the pieces is not there, but an entire wall is his senior thesis based on trees. So in 2020, at age 85, Alan obtained a BFA degree in painting. Congratulations, Alan, on that. Yeah. So a master's degree in OLS, a BFA in painting, an architect, and today he continues to study with us. He's in John Reho's advanced painting class for the, I think John said this is the 6th painting class he's taking with John. He's still painting, he's still learning. I asked John, Alan's painting teacher, to speak to me about Alan. I asked him, what is it like to have Alan as a student? John said, he really likes having Alan in class because he brings a different perspective than most of the other students. John noted that Alan participates in critiques and students listen to what he has to say. He said Alan is discovering his own style and aesthetic as a painter, noting that he likes bright colors and he uses flat patterns often in a linear perspective. I'm a theater guy, I don't know what that means, but John Reho likes it. When I asked John what qualities Alan brings as a student, a litany of adjectives came forward, and you would know all of these. He said, Alan is so gregarious, friendly, polite, respectful, cordial to other students. He said, and I quote John Reho, you know, he gets along with everybody. He's a charming man. So true. I asked John, what would you like the people joining us today to know about Alan? And he thought the example Alan demonstrates of being a lifelong learner, his desire to keep learning and being active and productive. Alan wants to engage his mind, his body, and be socially active in order to engage himself in what is current and what is creative in his daily life. I asked Nicole Pritchard, who is here today, who is a fellow student of Alan's, to tell me what's it like to be in class with Alan. And I loved it. She said, well, Alan hits the deck running. He's the first out the door and he's ready to work the minute he gets there. She also said, he's always welcoming and warm to new students. And lastly, I asked Alan what he'd like all of you to know about why he continues at Purdue Fort Wayne. And Alan said, and I quote, I'd like them to know that they should keep doing things and not let their age be a limiting factor. That they can always keep exploring, keep learning, keep visiting, as long as it is possible to enjoy life and learn as much about it as you can for as long as you can. Alan feels like retirement is a bad word. Not sure I actually agree with you on that, Alan. The last quote I got from Alan was, "Age shouldn't be a limitation." That I do agree with you, Alan. Thank you for having me today, and congratulations, Alan, on this lovely exhibition of a lifelong love.
Well, thank you, Jeff and John, for sharing anecdotes and reflections of Alan's career. But two takeaways that I got from that is, number one, there was a woman behind Alan who inspired painting, whether to get him out of the house or what. And secondly, we should never use the word retired, just say refired. He's been refired. And so now it's time to honor Alan and to get him up here and let him tell you the story of his remarkable career, his experiences, and the lessons he learned along the way. Please join me in welcoming him.
Testing, testing. Here we go. We got it. We got it. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, when I look around here, I see people that I've known from all walks of life, and it's just amazing to me. And I'm very happy to know all of you. And I think Fort Wayne, one of the big questions that I was asked is, why did I choose Fort Wayne when I was from the East? And I think it's because people are very friendly here, and people are willing to work together to get accomplish things, really, instead of get things done. It's a decision I made back in 1961, and I'm really glad I made that decision. And I'm just, Fort Wayne is my home, is what I think. Other things about why did I choose architecture? When I was in high school, back in Philadelphia, my parents gave me an aptitude test. And the results of the test were either a civil engineer or an architect. And I had a lot of relatives in the Toledo area who said, you gotta go to Michigan. And they were all Michigan fans. And so I ended up there with the thought that if architecture wasn't for me, that I could switch to another school. It was such a big university, there were other good schools there. But I enjoyed architecture, and I stayed with it and graduated from it. I also had some influences in my life that led both to architecture and art. My parents were very interested in art. They were from an area where Andrew Wyeth was, and other artists of that ilk. One, a furniture maker, George Nakashima, and these were people that had an impression on me back at that time. I also got a lot of help in the music, theater, because my parents loved theater, and we didn't live far from New York City, so we could go up there occasionally to the museums and to the theaters. And those two things, art and theater, really had an influence on my background. And also, another thing, back in the 50s, when you went to school in architecture, there were no computers. We didn't have computers. Everything was by hand, drawing with pencil or ink or pastel was all by hand. And so I learned to draw and paint by hand, and it really helped me and opened my eyes to my profession, and eventually my second career in art. And I had a lot of help in art at the school that was at that time IUPUI, or IUPU Fort Wayne, excuse me. And I had good teachers with Audrey Yushenko, John Rayhoff. Let's see, are there any others here that were teachers? Well, anyway, I had a lot of support. Sarah Nordling, as John had mentioned, and John Gantz, who was a good printmaker, and he was a big influence on my life. So that's a lot of who I am. I enjoy meeting people, working with people, helping people solve problems, because that's what architecture is. It's meeting somebody that has a problem and wants you to help them with it. And it's like putting parts of a puzzle together. And I got a lot of enjoyment out of that, and I still do. So you've been very patient sitting here and listening to us up front, and I'm about ready to turn this back to Irene to take on any questions or comments that you might have. And thank you very much.
Okay, so now it's your turn, but before we do, Alan was a teacher before he was an architect. I'm wondering if any in the audience was a student of Alan's. Anybody? Okay, we have one, another architect. Very good. Okay, now it is your opportunity to ask questions of any of the three panelists about the future of Headwaters Park, about Alan as a student, although John did share some anecdotes. And Alan, what motivated him? What might you want to know that has not been covered? Tony.
Alan, I want to think about, when you were younger, you went to college and be an architecture? What I meant to be an architect?
I'm sorry.
Did you go to college to be an architect?
Yes, I did, Tony.
What college did you went to?
The University of Michigan.
Other questions?
Not a question, but a comment from Tom Hoffman. In 1985, Alan designed our dental office. And I'm no longer practicing because I'm not retired. But I just wanted to mention that it's still a head turner as you're driving east on State Street. And I didn't make the cut today of the architectural picture. We sure appreciate your hard work on that project.
And we're still talking to each other, too. Thank you, John.
Alan, Maureen's name has come up here as the woman behind the man. How did you two meet and get together?
How did we get together? That I don't have enough time to tell. No, it was a beautiful experience. I met her at a Christmas party in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the university. I was dating another woman at the time who was in charge of the party, so she left me to do the things she had to do, and Maureen was there and just wandering around, and she was and still very attractive, and I was drawn to her. And it's been 66 years of marriage ever since then. And thank you, dear. I still love you. She's my first wife, by the way.
What artists do you feel are the strongest
Oh, a good question, Jim. Oh, the question was, what artists have had a strong influence on me besides John Rahoff and Audrey Schenka? I have really enjoyed Paul Klee, who was a Bauhaus artist and a very multifaceted person. And some of the works out there, I use PK1 or PK2 because that's in respect to them. And David Hockney, who's a current artist still alive, about my age, whose use of colors and trees I just love. And there are many others, and I want to thank John Rahoff because he's always showing me new artists. Have you seen this one, or have you seen that one? And that's been a big help in my career. Thank you.
I have a question for you. I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about your thought process when you were building the Pyramid Plaza. It was so unusual and so different looking for its time. And thanks for all the memories from it that I have had at Pyramid Plaza.
What are your thoughts on the pyramid process?
Oh, every time I go to the airport or I'm in that direction, the question was, what are my thoughts about the pyramid buildings out by the airport? And I just really get a warm feeling in my heart when I see them. And I want to thank your family for being so influential with those happening. Your father, Joe Gerson, was just inspiring to me, and thank you.
Thank you.
And today I received a gift. And it's an artist in my neighborhood that I get to see occasionally, and this is Rosie's picture to me, Rosie Beer. And we trade pictures every now and then. And thank you, Rosie, and the family too.
Are there any other questions for Alan? Yeah.
This is for John O'Connell. Is Alan an anomaly, or do you have other senior students, post-career students, and others PFW regents as well?
Is Alan an anomaly, or do we have other, quote, non-traditional students? We do have some non-traditional students. One of the things that's an advantage to senior citizens for Purdue Fort Wayne is that after the age 65, they get a significant cut in the cost of going to class. So that brings a lot of people to that. We also have continuing education courses. I see Seth Green is here. Raise your hand, Seth Green. Seth Green is in charge of our ceramics program, and he has really grown our continuing education program. So he gets a lot of people from the community. Many of them are senior citizens, and the thing about Seth's class is you basically have to come class once, and then the studio is open to you whenever you want to watch. So I see people coming in and out of the studio all the time who I think, wait, that's not a regular studio. What are they doing here? And they just say, well, I'm in the class. I can be in here and I can work whenever I want, Seth says. So we do have a fair amount of students who continue. And mainly in, I would say art is a strong, attractive courses for that.
I'd just like to say for those of us who are retired and not quite as ambitious as Alan, there's the Senior Scholars Program, which if you're 60, retired, you can basically audit classes for free. And all you have to do is get the instructor's permission. The only thing, and one of the big differences between that and what Alan has done is that we can't use labs. Get the grade, basically. So, but I've been doing it the last several years, and other people who have are too. It's a lot of fun if you're not as ambitious as that.
Okay, one of my grandchildren.
I'd like to know your creative process when you sit down in front of a blank sheet of paper or blank canvas. Like, what's
What's your creative process when you sit down to a blank canvas?
Usually, there's something in my mind that concerns me, or I'm interested in, something that has struck a fancy with me, and it's from there that I start sort of just doodling around, sketching a little bit, and seeing what happens. And in some of my art classes that I'm taking now, the teacher, who's really tough, wants us to do three different sketches of our thoughts, and then from there, we work together to pick the one that we think would be the best.
I do have an anecdote for you that he told me, and John Rahove told me too, so it must be sort of a story in the art department. So this is one of the nicest men we all know, right? Gentle, charming man. And Chris Gans, who's our printmaking teacher, is also a gentle, kind, soft-spoken teacher. But apparently, there's a historical row that happened between Alan and Chris Gans when Chris Gans got mad at him.
Oh, wow. He chewed me up one side and down the other, and all the classmates, the students were there listening, and their jaws dropped open, and they just tore into John. They said, "What are you doing to that poor old man?" And I had so many friends supporting me. John, he was amazed. He was speechless. And since then, I've told him he's the meanest teacher I've ever had. Jokingly, of course. And I do have one quick thing. I've noticed there were a few people in this room who were in another profession and architecture that have left architecture but are now artists. And I think that's great. And if you're not an artist, you can do other things like get t-shirts for a group. And one of my groups is called Meatloafers. And the reason it's called Meatloafers is we go to Henry's Bar and Restaurant on Monday night to have meatloaf, which is their specialty. And that's, again, people in that group that are doing other things besides stepping back and retiring. Another group is breakfast clubs and things of that nature. And that's something that's a lot of fun and I get a lot of pleasure out of.
Well, I'm a proud meatloafer, and but we very seldom eat meatloaf. You know? One Alan story, I was helping Grinsfelder Architects with marketing for a year, and I don't remember whether this is a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, Alan, but I remember you saying, "Women love me, fish fear me."
Yeah, my friend Walt Strausser's, who's here, would know about that. We used to go on fishing trips together, and in Canada, or just across the border, there was a store that sold a lot of things like that, and that was a lot of fun to get. But thanks, Joni. Right.
So, can you talk a little bit about how your career in architecture influenced your career as an artist? What do you see as similarities and differences between architecture and art?
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the first things I was told about architecture was that you needed to be good at mathematics, be good at art, and sort of be a little bit of a psychologist. And those things appealed to me, and I think the same is true in art. The only difference is art is viewed from a distance or a surface. It's two-dimensional, or most of it is, and architecture's three-dimensional, and you can go inside it and enjoy the spaces inside too. And if you see some of the photographs that are on the screen or in the center downtown, which is now the Citizen Center, has a high atrium and space with natural light coming in from above. And also the library on Pontiac, Hannah and Creighton has that same feeling inside, and that's one of the things I like to create. Well, everybody must be getting hungry.
I'd like to ask Jeff a question. Since Headwaters is really the living room and a main attraction downtown, are there plans to do anything different, to expand it, to whatever? What's the vision, or is it going to stay as it is?
Yeah, thank you for that, Irene. And Alan, you will recall when we were working together, the Headwaters Park Commission and the Headwaters Park Alliance, we had offered a plan to continue on as kind of the group that was doing riverfront development. And that didn't go, and that's okay that maybe we weren't selected, but we were really the first, I think, downtown riverfront development project. And again, flood mitigation, flood control. Look at that famous picture, $10 million worth of damage in that thumb area. That was part of the brilliance, I think, of this plan that Alan helped put together and implement. And yes, I think we would have liked to have done more, but I'm just very pleased because there were a lot of nervous folks, there were a lot of doubters out there, that we were able to do this 30 acres of a really beautiful downtown Central Park that mitigates flood damage to the city, brings in 500,000 people a year with festivals and ice skating, and I think is still seen as the first and foremost downtown riverfront project of its kind. And also, finally, folks are wanting to live there with the apartment buildings that are going up. So I'm pleased with that. We are repairing the splash pad. We'd love to see the fog dish repaired. If there are any interested donors out there, please see me before you go. And yes, maybe the towers, I think that's still a possibility. So I think there is a possibility for more to do, even though I may not be playing that role. Alan, hopefully you will be. So thank you again for your brilliance and your steadfastness in this project.
I need to thank, there are people here that I want to really thank for helping me in this event. And of course, John Tam is #1 on my list. He did a great job. And he put up with me. And the rabbi also helped. I think Samara Saray, if she's here, she helped. Beth Swag, and of course I can't forget Maureen. She did great. And thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate your friendships and seeing you here.
All right, so now I want to thank Alan for inspiring us, and hopefully you will all get inspired and find your own mountain to climb, and John and Jeff for sharing your insights and reflections. And now it's time to join us in the social hall, and if you have any other questions or want to meet with any of the three, please take that opportunity as we dine and have fun together. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.